All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the South Fulton Mental Health Collaborative's Wellness Wednesday. Today, Tedra and I are here with a special guest that we're going to introduce in just a moment. But before we get started, I just want to remind you that the South Fulton Mental Health Collaborative is an effort between the Fulton County School District, Odyssey Family Counseling Center, and the South Fulton Parents for Education group on Facebook and their nonprofit to provide resources to our community, specifically surrounding mental health and combating stigma and getting better access for our community. I am Elise Payne. I'm the school-based program coordinator at Odyssey Family Counseling Center, and I'm also a therapist. And I want to introduce Tedra. I'll let you introduce your position here with us today.
Yes, and I am Tedra Perkins, the Child and Adolescent Coordinator, as well as a therapist at Odyssey Family Counseling Center. And today we have an amazing guest speaker that will be talking about resiliency. So are we ready for our introductions?
Yes, I think we are.
All right. So today, guys, we have, you all will not believe it. If you can see this bio, and this is just a snippet of what we have today. We have Dr. Tim Cunningham, who is the Vice President of Practice and Innovation at Emory Healthcare. He is the head of nursing, of education, and professional development at Emory Healthcare, with his focus on resiliency, how do teams function and individuals bounce back in the face of adversity. He also, wait, you won't believe this. He also was a clown in his first career that performed at Boston's Children's Hospital for the Big Apple Circus. He was so inspired by the work that he saw with the nurses that he decided, you know what, this is something that I want to do. So he went to nursing school. And so he became an emergency trauma nurse and has worked in many pediatric hospitals across the United States. He has also done some studying abroad where he's helped many others just internationally. And he taught at nursing at the University of Virginia and has done extensive research on resiliency and compassion. He is honored to spend some time with you all today to talk about a much important and needed issue. So we welcome again and thank you so much, Dr. Tim Cunningham.
Tedra, thank you so much. And Elise, thanks for having me
No problem.
time with you all. And I'm excited to know that you all are out there on Facebook Live listening in. I mean, the fact that you even signed up for this tells me a lot of things already. One, you care. Two, you know this stuff is tricky. This stuff is hard. And three, as Elise mentioned, you're helping push against the stigma that is in this country and other countries I've worked in too, when it comes to mental health and wellness. I think of the words of James Baldwin, the poet, writer, activist. He once said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing will change if it's not faced, right? James Baldwin said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing will change if it's not faced. And I want to begin with some gratitude to you all for stepping into this challenging space of mental health and wellness. Because we know if we don't talk about it, nothing's going to happen.
Right.
And it's more important now than ever to talk about. I mean, let's think about the stressors that we are facing right now in this state, in this country, in this world. I want to acknowledge those, and then we'll get into some work around resilience. We've got COVID, you know, this pandemic that the world has not seen for more than 100 years. And right when we think things might be getting better, they seem to get even worse. There's so much stress around that. So there's COVID. We've got the social injustice that we see in our country. And I call it acute on chronic. That's kind of a medical term, but maybe I'll unpack that a little bit. I call it our acute on chronic social injustice that we see. And chronic meaning long-term, acute meaning like right here and right now. So when I say chronic is, let's look at it from the beginnings of this country, the racial injustice. So that's the long term over the scope. And I know there are a lot of folks here with kids who have been there in the 60s and then the civil rights movement, have seen this arc and these challenges. The acute part, that's sort of the like, that immediate thing. I'm reflecting on the murders of Breonna Taylor, who as a nurse, she was training to be a nurse. I think of the murder of George Floyd. And I understand from my colleagues that I'm working with, my family, my community, that is a ton of stress. where we are right now as we reflect on the acute on chronic racial injustice in this country. So we've got COVID, we've got racial injustice, we've got financial stress. Whew. And I'm going to make the assumption that everybody listening in is affected by that too. And that's a lot. And then on top of it all, we're going back to school. Whew. What does that mean, right? I mean, I'm reading in the news every day. I have no children of my own. Oh, so many of my friends, I've got nephews and nieces. The stress that my family and colleagues are talking about. Do we go to school? Do we not go to school? What is this online learning? My internet just went out, or I don't have access to internet. So I just want to acknowledge that we are all facing stress. Some of us are facing stress we've never experienced before in our lives. Some of us are facing recurrences of stress. Some of us don't even know what stress we're going to face tomorrow, but we know it's probably coming, right? And that's why we need resilience. That's why all of these reasons are why we need to practice. And I say practice intentionally because resilience, I think of it as like if you're training for a marathon and you've never run a day in your life, you're not going to get out of bed and run 26.2 miles with probably out dropping dead from a heart attack, right? You're training for a marathon. If you've never run before, your first day of running, you might need to stretch a little bit and maybe go for a walk for maybe half a mile. And you build up and you build up and you build up. And it takes time. It takes attention, it takes practice. And when we're talking about resilience today, I think one of the core ideas is that it takes practice. And what do people say? Practice makes perfect. I don't think that's true. I think practice makes better. I think there's always a little bit of work that we can do. And when we're talking about resilience today, I'd like us to think about it as a practice, and I'd like us to think about it with a sense of forgiveness and grace. A lot of the nurses that I work with, I've been an emergency nurse. I practiced clinically for 7 years. My last clinical practice full-time, I was working nights in New York City when I was in grad school doing research on resilience. So I was trying to practice my own resilience while not sleeping, working all night, and then going to school and doing research and blah, blah, blah. But I realized over that time that sometimes, especially as nurses, we want to get it right. And as parents, the parents that I know and the parents that I love, also, y'all want to get it right. You love your kids. You want to, in spite of it all, do what's best for your kids and do what's best for your family. And when it doesn't work out, when COVID gets in the way, when schools get shut down or reopen or shut down or reopen and back and forth, I know you can feel as a parent like you're not doing a good enough job. As a nurse, so often I'd leave the ship feeling like I could have done better. And so one thing that I've learned as we look at resilience is that we have to forgive ourselves if we don't feel like we're quite hitting that mark. So if we say what's resilience, Tedra or Elise, what are your definitions of resilience? If I were to ask you, at least Tedra, in a sentence or two, what would you say resilience is?
I think that for me, resilience means being able to get back up again when stuff knocks you down. I think that's a very simple way of putting it, but kind of the being able to keep moving forward in spite of, even when something is going on, being able to pick yourself back up, move forward, even if it's incrementally, even if it's just not giving up completely, in mental health, that's so important that we say so often, don't choose a permanent solution to, a short-term problem. That's where we encourage our clients who are struggling with mental health concerns. And a lot of them deal with suicidal ideation and feeling like they want to give up their whole lives, that we try and remind them, like, let's look at some other things that we can do instead of these really drastic permanent things of, completely checking out. So I think that's what it means for me. What do you think, Tedra?
I agree. I definitely think it means to just continue to overcome life's challenges. There are always going to be trials and tribulations that are going to come in your way, but how do you overcome those things? How do you continue to bounce back from them? How do you continue to say, you know what, even though that happened, even though I'm going through this, I can still continue to stand and push forward. And you reach out to support. You reach out and find strength, some kind of way, you find a way to continue to bounce back from everything that is going on.
Yeah, Tedra, I think that point of bouncing back, that really resonates a lot. And a lot of the nurses and doctors and other healthcare workers that I work with, they'll say that too. It's about bouncing back, right? How do you bounce back knowing tomorrow's gonna be stressful too? Okay, that's where we are. And something that I've learned about bouncing back, if you get a bouncy ball, like remember those little balls you can get from the machine for like 25 cents, whatever. If you drop it, it bounces down, bounces up, and bounces again, and bounces again. But when it bounces back up, doesn't always bounce back up to the very top height that you dropped it from, right? That's physics. And when we think about resilience, I'd encourage everyone to sort of have a sense of grace when you think about your bounce back.
Yes.
When you practice bouncing back, you might not bounce all the way back up to 100%, especially now with so much going on. And that's totally okay. That is totally okay. And something that we're learning with our teams here is that even bouncing back a little bit is better than nothing, for one. And when we recognize that little bit of bounce back, we can honor that and we can celebrate that. That's a win. And in the face of everything going on this planet, in this country, that's a huge win. So when we talk about resilience, like a really important part about resilience is the sense of community. I think sometimes we take a lot of pressure on ourselves, especially single parents. If you're the only person running the household, caring for your children, doing all this work, there's a lot of pressure on yourself. And a key aspect about resilience, and you all both kind of mentioned on this, is what is your connection with your community? And it begins by kind of seeing who's around you. If you've got a little bit of extra energy, celebrating what's going on in the community for other people to show them how they're bouncing back, because we might not always see it. And then that comes back around to us and folks can help point out, you're doing a really, really good job right now. I know you got a lot on your plate. So I think a part of it is recognizing your community around you and building up a sense, there's this term called camaraderie, right? This collection of us as a community and how we function and moving together. Now, COVID makes that hard, but we're learning to build community through Zoom, right? Fun things on the camera. So let's not throw that out and just say, what are ways that we can build and support the community? And I think it's resilience. It's a give and take. It's a two-way street. So if you're feeling kind of resilient and in a good spot and you've got a little extra energy, do you have the ability to reach out to your neighbor and just check in on them? Do you have the ability to reach out if you've got other folks in your community that are working a little bit harder right now for whatever reason? Can you just check in and say, I'm thinking of you. I see you. Want a meal? I'll leave it on your porch. I'm not going to touch it. I'll leave it back, right? If you've got the resources, maybe you can even do like a seamless delivery or something. But so much resilience is also how we connecting with each other and moving that way. How do we do it, right? A lot of people say, so how do you practice your own resilience? And there are things that you can do. We know that exercise is a good way to practice that. Now, again, we're not going to run a marathon tomorrow, especially if you've never run, but even taking a flight of stairs in a place where you might take an escalator or an elevator, that's also exercise. You know what's also exercise? Laughing, right? When you laugh,
wait a minute.
Right? When you laugh, your heart rate changes. Your breathing rate changes. The same thing happens when you're working out, right? Your heart rate increases, your breathing increases. So,
well, I exercise every day. Thank you for that.
I'm doing it right now.
Exactly. Now I have a reason. I exercise every day, guys. Thank you.
No, find those YouTube videos that make you laugh. If you've got young kids, even though you're exhausted because you're working to take care of these kids, when they do something really funny, just let that authentic laugh come out. And in that same time, know that you're exercising. I think a lot of resilience that we do, we don't even realize that we're doing it. And if we realize that we're doing it, in fact, there was this really crazy study about housekeepers up in Boston. It was done a few years ago. And basically the researchers measured how many steps a housekeeper took in an 8-hour shift. And let's say it was 15,000 steps, just making that up. And then the researcher took a huge group of housekeepers, split them in half. One group, she just followed their work, took blood pressure, did all these measurements that researchers do, and just watched them for a few months. With the other group, she told them at the beginning of the 3-month period, she said, did you know that in your regular work, you take enough steps every day to get enough exercise, as proven by the FDA? She made up some name of some big counselor, right? She told them that they're good enough, they're strong enough, and they're doing enough. And you know what happened after a few months? When they pulled all their data in, they were following people's weight, their blood pressure, the mental well-being checks and things like that. The people that were told you're doing enough to take care of yourself, as a group, lost weight, their waist size decreased, their blood pressure went down, and their sense of well-being went up by being told they were good enough. Sorry, this is really mean. This sits heavy with me, especially as a nurse. We have a lot of nurses who are working so hard right now, and I don't think they always hear that you're doing enough. And I know with the parents that I know, you don't always hear that you're good enough. You're strong enough. So I want to say just right now, everybody listening, you're good enough. You're strong enough. You're wise enough. Now, with all these stressors, it takes a little extra effort, and we recognize that. But what if we begin from a place of strength that is ourselves as human beings? Because if you're watching this and you're breathing and you're watching, you are a human being, and I know that you're good enough, strong enough. So what if we begin from that point when we think about resilience? There's this concept, and please cut me off at any point. I can get.
No, you're good. You are great. We didn't expect to get emotional today. No, now we're all heartfelt. Our hearts are beating in a different way now. Please.
Right? Is crying also a form of exercise? Maybe so.
Take it.
Yeah, feeling. And we know with all the stressors, sometimes we lose a sense of feeling, right? Because we kind of withdraw a little bit. So the beauty in feeling, it's a really powerful thing that we have as humans. There's this really great concept that I'd like to share with you all, and it's called post-traumatic growth, or PTG for short, post-traumatic growth. And what it is, it's this idea. It was developed by researchers in like 1996. That was when I graduated high school, I think. And these researchers did all this research on people that had been through trauma, chronic trauma, and also acute trauma in their lives. And what they learned is that a lot of people, as we go through trauma, we have suffering, and some of that suffering sits with us for a long time, sometimes our whole lives. It's real. It's happening. It's happened to me. I'll totally admit it. And I still work with it and struggle with it. And at the same time, there are elements of growth that we've learned from people that have gone through chronic or acute traumas. And there are 5 elements of growth that I'd like to share with you. And they're all about post-traumatic growth. So element number 1 is this idea of personal strength. So when you've gone through a trauma or are going through a trauma, what can you do to recognize your own personal strength that's come out of it? Again, you might not get back up to 100%. A lot of us may never get back to 100%. That's okay. But what is some strength you've learned? What's some strength that you've seen in your neighbors, in other parents and other families? So recognizing personal strength, 1. Number 2, recognizing closer relationships. Now, I'm not going to lie, some of my relationships have ended since COVID started, but the ones that have not ended have strengthened. We communicate differently. I feel closer with certain friends and family members. So recognizing that and knowing that's a win. It's a big win. So we've got personal strength, we've got closer relationships. Number 3, we've got greater appreciation for life. I want to share a brief story. When I was working clinically as a nurse in 2014, 2015, I don't know if y'all remember the West Africa Ebola outbreak. I took some time away from my work in New York, and I worked as a frontline caregiver for children suffering from Ebola in the West African country of Sierra Leone. We saw severe suffering and death every single day. It was scary. It was horrific. And at the same time, what I learned from that, and I still deal with trauma from that. I still seek help for that, what I saw. But at the same time, my appreciation for life is I never would have imagined how big it is. And that helps keep me going when things are rough. As we are losing friends and family members, I'm going to guess everyone on this Facebook Live has probably lost at least one person they know to COVID. If not death, illness. How are we learning about our appreciation for life? I think that can be a big piece with COVID, right? All right, let's keep going. So we've got personal strength, closer relationships, greater appreciation for life, new possibilities. How many of you all have figured out new ways to communicate, right? How many of you all have figured out new ways? So I can't see the people I love for a week. I'm going to become an artist. I'm going to do this crazy thing. I'm going to paint my house. I'm going to clean that room that I've just been storing things. all new possibilities, wins. Can we look at those as wins? And number 5 is spiritual development, which I think is a very big thing, especially with a lot of the nurses that I work with. Now, whatever spiritual is for you, it might be religious, it might just be spiritual. That doesn't matter, but how have you grown in your own faith or spiritual or religious practice? And again, taking a moment, just a moment, because who's got time for more than a moment sometimes, right? But taking a true moment and reflecting on that and giving yourself a pat on the back, calling it a win. So think about your own wins. What are your wins in personal strength over the last few months? What are your wins in closer relationships? What are your wins in a greater appreciation for life? What are your wins in new possibilities? And what are your wins in spiritual development? And I'd encourage you to think about that for yourself, your family, your community. And in that, there's a lot of resilience. And in that, I think we can bounce back. I don't know, Tedra and Elise, I've been talking a ton. Any thoughts on that? Or I don't know if folks have maybe sent some comments or questions, or would love to sort of open this up for a little more of a conversation in the last couple of minutes if you want.
I think this has definitely been very informative and helpful for all of us, like for the community, especially with the post-traumatic growth. So Elise is actually going to post those 5 aspects in the chat for everyone to have. These are things that we do need to think about on a daily basis, of just like all the things that we could work on, of recognizing strengths and just being connected with others. This is everything that's very helpful for us. And so I think this is great. I think this is so helpful for us, especially during this time. This is helpful for us even moving forward. Some things that we never actually took time to think about because we were just moving and going. It was a routine that we were in. And it was, we never took the time to realize like, wow, I need to reflect and think about these aspects of post-traumatic growth. We never did that. It's like things in our lives have changed right now, but time has not changed. Time has always been the same. And so it's like now we're noticing more places that we can implement different things in our lives. And this is one of them that it's like, okay, now let's focus on these 5 things that we need to reflect on every day and be able to point out how can we work on at least one of those things.
Yeah. This is I don't know if you can see, I've got a trash can in my hand right here. And I've got this big notepad right here. And I'm going to call this notepad perfectionism. Everything in this notepad is perfectionism. And right now, if y'all can see, I'm throwing it out. Throwing it out. I think as we do that, Tedra, exactly to what you're saying, we also need to let go of perfectionism.
Yes.
Because that might cause more harm than good.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. And nothing is done perfectly. It's like there's always ways that we can change things. There's always ways that it can be done differently. And it's different for everyone. And
yes.
A routine, all 3 of us have different routines. All 3 different ways of dealing with resiliency.
Yes.
Doesn't mean that mine is perfect, Elise is perfect, it's different. And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's great that we can feed off of one another and support one another, because it's like, I may have an idea that is different, but it's like, oh, okay, that's something I've never thought about. And you all are able to feed off of it and say, okay, let me be able to, I can either use it for myself or I could help to support my community and give it to someone else.
Yes. Yeah. Tedra, I love that you brought that up because, and in the research on resilience, what we know in the research on resilience is exactly what you said. There is no one way. Each individual way, each community has its own way. And we also know those ways change over time. You might be someone who likes to go for a jog, but then your knees get sore and you change. So change is okay. I'm reminded of something I learned from one of my clown friends. As you mentioned, I was a hospital clown for years. I still work with an organization called Clowns Without Borders. They're so cool. We go to refugee camps and war zones and do free clown shows for kids. And it's all about connection. It's all about how we interact. But one of my clown mentors made this great statement. He said, when we learn something as a performer, if I'm learning to juggle, if I'm learning to do a magic trick, we need to try not to compare ourselves to what everyone else is doing around us. But we do need to compare. So what we should compare ourselves to is how much we've grown from the first time we started trying to do this. So as you think about comparison, if you see someone doing really well with resilience, ask them what they're doing, but be kind to yourself and don't say, well, I need to be like so-and-so because they're getting it right and I'm not. No, 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 no. What if it is, I'm going to try this out. And the only comparison I'm going to make is, how was I when I started? And if I'm a bit better, then I'm winning.
Yes.
And it's working.
That's amazing. I think that that is so important for everybody across the board, and specifically in this time right now, this community of parents and teachers and students who are really struggling with, what does this mean for me? How am I supposed to be connected? All those things. I think that it's really easy to get lost in, you want a big fix. Like, I just don't want to feel this way. I just don't want to have to experience this right now, or it would all be better if ... and recognizing that those little choices and those small achievements and those things that are not these overarching massive concepts can really make the difference between a day ending where you're feeling really down and just defeated, and feeling like you were able to work towards this overall change. If you want to see these great changes, and we want to see change in our community, we want to see change in our country, we want to see change for people, we can't just go this huge massive thing right away. We've got to be able to build up our resiliency along the way through all of this, and all those changes do add up and they make a difference. And then when the time comes that we can make these massive changes, we can vote, we can do all the things that are demonstrating on a larger scale, we have the resiliency of the energy to do those things because we were investing along the way. I am paying attention to the Facebook comments, and one of the comments we received was a question that said, which I think would be really amazing to hear, can you comment on teachers and how they can address the stress they receive from parents and administrators, much like how nurses deal with it from patients and doctors and administrators? So can you comment on how teachers, they can address their stress that they receive from these external factors?
I've got a couple answers. Thank you to the person who asked that. That's such a great question. Two ways to look at that. One is, and this is something I've done as an emergency nurse, when I've literally been ripped to pieces by parents who maybe had to sit in the waiting room for 20 minutes because their child needed a Tylenol, which, like, from an emergency point of view, not a big deal. But from that parent's point of view, they're afraid, they're angry, they've maybe never been in an emergency department before. So one practice that I've learned and other people do is that when we're confronted by a stressed out parent, loved one, my first thought is, the person in front of me right now is suffering tremendously. I recognize they're suffering tremendously. I'll never understand their suffering because I'm me and they are them. So instead of trying to understand their suffering, I'm just going to say, I know you're suffering. And that helps ground me a little bit to be with them. So that's one, recognizing the suffering that people bring to you. Two, there's this practice called Tong Lin. It's a breathing practice that I've learned with patients who are actively dying. And I've also done with students and family members when they're really agitated. When you are communicating with someone and they're communicating with you, when you breathe in, imagine breathing in their suffering. Whatever that is, maybe it's a dark color, maybe it's a texture, maybe it's just a thought. And when I inhale, I'm breathing in your suffering. And as you breathe out, even if you're talking, imagine breathing out calm, cool. Maybe the word is love. Maybe the word is compassion. So with every single breath, you yourself are practicing compassion and sort of a generosity. And a third part to that is, when you reflect, when you bounce back, what if resilience is also bouncing back for a moment to reflect on why you became a teacher? Bouncing back for the moment to reflect on why you became a nurse, why you became someone who's here to care, a social worker, a therapist. And in that moment of bouncing back, that can help you ground yourself a little bit, because the reality is you're not going to fix that person's suffering. The reality is they might still give you a hard time for a while. But I think as you can sort of build yourself up, you can provide better support for that person and maybe turn them around. But if not, you can still be in a place where you can be a little more resilient and leave that conversation and go to the next and be open to whatever that conversation brings. It's so hard. And I tip my hat to all the teachers. As a nurse to a teacher, I love y'all. I'm worried. And part of my resilience practice is a meditation practice. And I begin every morning thinking about our teachers, our nurses, those of us on the front lines, in a really challenging place.
Yeah, we at Odyssey Family Counseling Center, we partner and we are honored to partner with more than 20 South Fulton County schools, and we treasure our relationship with our school staff. I've been very lucky to be able to have met with them individually over the last 3 weeks in preparation for the school year. And at Odyssey Family Counseling Center, we offer mental health counseling for individuals, families, and groups in the school setting, but we also get to do workshops and trainings with teachers and school staff. And a lot of my trainings, I try and end with a deep bow to them, a recognition of these are our disconnection detectives. Like these are the people who if there's disconnection going on, they are finding it, whether it's virtually, like literally the Wi-Fi isn't connected, or if a child isn't connecting, if a child is struggling, if a parent is struggling, they're the ones who are noticing it. And I think that's the same for nurses. It's your job to try and assess and figure out and connect where there is disconnection and figure out the pieces. And so we just are so thankful that we have the opportunity to work in the schools, but we also have those programs for adults and individuals who are struggling with substance use concerns. We have really a variety of different programs that we do to support the mental health and wellness of our community. And it's in the schools. A lot of it's in the schools. And so we are so glad to call our school staff our colleagues. You know, the staff that we work with are our colleagues, and we are, you know, lucky to be on their teams. So one of the other things that is coming up in the Facebook comments is just remarking on your energy and the way that you express yourself and the way that you're connecting. And I think it's really important, some of the things and clues that I've heard you say about that you invest in a meditation practice, you are acknowledging areas where you have yourself struggled and you keep pushing forward. And so I think not only in what you're sharing, but how you're sharing what you do is a great modeling for us in this community and for all of our friends on Facebook to see that it takes on, you have to take on a different mode and practice doing that, acknowledging what's going on for you, building connections, sharing with community, having a spiritual practice, all of these different things that you've shared in the personal connection. And so we really want to thank you so much for your time. We are at about 12:34, so we've gone over a little bit, but I'm totally happy with that.
Yes, it was much needed.
It's much needed. So what, you know, if you have to leave us on something to head out into this week, you know, in Fulton County schools, they started on Monday. And so it's Wednesday. And so we know how Wednesday is after you've started school on Monday. What is something that we can share with our students, parents, and teachers as they end this week to help keep their resiliency up? What would you kind of leave them with?
Oh my gosh, can I leave them with two things?
Yes, of course.
So as you've heard, I've dropped the F-bomb a few times in this conversation. I'm gonna drop the F-bomb again. And that F-bomb in this conversation is the word forgiveness. Self-forgiveness, self-grace. When you got to crash, have a crash pad where you can just lay down, even if that's a nap for 5 minutes. Forgiveness and grace with the work that you're doing for yourself and the folks that you're working with. 1. 2, this is something I like to share with my nurses. A chaplain taught me this years ago. The heart feeds itself before it feeds the rest of the body. And what that means, from like, you think about the way the heart beats, with every beat, right? The heart is squeezing blood to the tips of your toes and to the top of your head. And the way the heart works is you've got the deoxygenated blood that goes through your body. The heart pumps that into your lungs. Blood fills with oxygen. When your heart beats, before it squirts blood to the rest of your body, it takes all that freshly oxygenated blood directly to itself first. Right? Blood goes directly from the lungs into the heart. The heart takes the best blood in your body with the most oxygen and feeds all of its own muscle tissue so it can be strong enough to squeeze to get the blood everywhere else it needs to go. The heart is also a symbol of compassion and love, right? You all are in the loving profession. So how do you feed yourself so that you can feed the rest of your body? And the body is your classroom, the body is your family, the body is your community. So forgiveness, grace, and the heart feeds itself before it feeds the rest of the body. Can we live like hearts?
Mm. Thank you
That was
so
great.
much.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you
you.
all.
So we are so honored to have you be a part of our community. You are now forever a part of the South Fulton Mental
Yes,
Health
you are.
Collaborative. We would love to have you back. I'm sure we're going to get tons of responses from people as they're able to watch this. So this will be available for everyone. If you are watching with us live, if you happen to come catch this later, please share this. This video will be up on our page hopefully forever. You know, who knows what's gonna happen if our page changes a little bit, but for the time being, it will be up and available for you. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, people who you know need this. Take it in for yourself too. Make sure you watch and listen and take it in. Feed yourself first, and then also share with the people around you in your community. We welcome you back to join us next week. We are taking a break. We are having a little bit of a break next week, but we'll be back the next Wednesday. So that's September 2nd. We'll be back here, Facebook Live at 12 p.m. A couple different topics that we're looking at. We're trying to get our guest speakers nailed down. We're going to talk about health and nutrition, and we're also going to talk about those coping skills. So I think this will really translate well in from what we're learning about today, and talking about some even more specific skills, even some more things that can be your go-to, the things that can help build up that practice for you. So those are the things that we're going to do. Again, we're at Odyssey Family Counseling Center, and we welcome you. If you are someone you know is struggling in any way, or would just like somebody to talk to and work some things out, that's what we're here for. Tedra and I work with children and adolescents and with our schools, but we have a staff who sees everybody from the age of 4 all the way up. We'll take you. So come on in, and we have a lot of opportunities to work with you in the group, individual, and family setting. So thank you so much for checking in with us. And if you ever need resources or anything, feel free to reach out to the South Fulton Mental Health Collaborative. This is what this is here for. It's a resource bank. It's a place for us to get together and have conversations like this. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time today. Thank you so much, Dr. Tim Cunningham, for being here.
Thank you so
and,
much.
And investing in this community. We really appreciate it. And we welcome you back whenever you want to come back.
Yes. Thank you for connecting with us, showing us how to connect with others, but also letting us connect with you as well. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you all.
Yes, so we're going to say goodbye, everyone. Have a good rest of your day, and remember to feed yourself as you go out and do the work that you're doing. We will see you in 2 weeks on September 2nd. Goodbye.
Have a great one. Bye.